that have actually served.
I imagine that in choosing to honour particular servicemen, you've had to delve into some interesting histories from both wars. You will have more tales to tell now, won't you?
We've got many tales to tell. But to be honest, it was actually the RSA that did a lot of the research, and it was very hard research from what we understand. Pauline was telling us the other day when we had our photos taken for the papers that, they struggled with, they've just got an initial and a last name, and they've got to work out where they come from. And they could have signed up in Otago, but they've actually been from Wellington and just been down Been a Shepherd or something. So it was a lot of research that they've done to get all these names all sorted.
But this is fantastic for some families, is it not? Because there'll be men who were completely, until now, neglected, maybe on a roll of honour somewhere, but now they've got a cross, and now the families can be proud that they've been remembered like this.
Oh, most definitely. And it shows in the way that the dawn services are being celebrated these days with the kids marching as well, and, they've got granddad's medals and things like that. To me, that's what it's all about. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Okay, so you've got the World War I and now the World War II, and they're side by side at the cenotaph.
Indeed, yes. But split, so you can identify which fallen are from which conflict.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
John, all the best for tomorrow morning for it too.
Thank you very much, Jim.
So, John Neve, the social convener for the Balclutha Round Table. Panellists, are you like? I shouldn't speak for many of us, but probably many of us. When you're young, it's kind of just distant tales of daring do, and when you're older, the whole reality of it starts to come home.
Yeah,
I would sacrifice and the commitment and the absolute ghastliness of it all too.
And also just the vile rhetoric around at the moment with a lot of division and sort of the sabres rattling, which is like, can you not see what happened previously? And my uncle's done quite a bit in genealogy stuff. And I actually didn't know, but yeah, I had a couple of uncles, I think, on both sides who never came back from the war, and I didn't know about that when I was younger, so definitely.
Did either of you see that Dunkirk film last year?
Yes,
no.
I did.
I came away from that struck by how angry I was at the little distance that we had travelled since the enormous sacrifice of that event. So here are lives, thousands, hundreds, millions of lives that were irrevocably changed as a result of that conflict. In the pursuit of something extraordinary, something noble, something, honourable. And yet, actually, as a world, we have more slavery. We have gotten very little distance in the way in which we treat each other. We have just as many issues. And that was the bit that really makes me sad about that sacrifice. So for all of those crosses and all of those stories, I would have thought the best way for us to honour that was actually to have moved our society along, that actually our participation in a just world would be a much more fitting tribute than in almost anything we could do.
So you are saying, aren't you, that we haven't really changed? It's maybe that we tiptoe more and there's been no huge conflagration because of nuclear weapons, but in fact human nature's still got the same impulses.
Well, I have to say that I worry about it. I worry that that's the case. I worry that sacrifice, that to the honourable nature of let's not be downtrodden by an evil regime, has not necessarily delivered the dividend it should have.
Also, what's evil, right? The other side is always evil. So
you left the big question for the end, Penny.
Yeah.
Penny Ashton, thank you. Happy touring. Michael Moynihan, you too.
Nice to talk to you.
No mai, haere mai, whakarongo mai koe, ki te hotaka o te ahiahi. Good evening, this is Checkpoint. I'm Alex Perrottet, in for John Campbell tonight. Coming up on the program, terror in Toronto as a driver's 2-kilometre rampage kills at least 10 people and injures 16 others. The Cambridges they become a family of 5. The Duke and Duchess show off their newest prince to the world, and the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern reveals what New Zealand will give the as yet unnamed arrival. Also tonight, the President of New Zealand Cricket is threatened with physical violence in a petition to have her dumped from the Sky Cricket TV commentary team. Vanuatu's government calls for all residents to be evacuated from the island of Umbai permanently, and outrage over plans to change the zoning of Christchurch secondary schools.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. Parts of downtown Toronto could be cordoned off for weeks as the police piece together the circumstances of a deadly attack in the heart of Canada's largest city. A van driven at high speed ploughed into pedestrians for almost a kilometre along a busy street, killing 10 people and injuring 16. The driver, a 25-year-old Toronto man, Alec Manassian, is in custody. The city's police chief, Mark Saunders, says indications are that the attack was deliberate, but that it does not pose a wider security threat.
It is early. We're not excluding anything. It's our process, though, to follow what we have. And so the statement is accurate at this point in time. Based on what we have, there's nothing that does put it to compromise the national security footprint. Not excluded, but right now that's where we are.
Mark Saunders says Manassian was not previously known to the police and his motive is still unclear. The police in southern China are treating a deadly late-night fire in a karaoke bar as arson. 18 people were killed and 5 injured in the fire in the city of Guanyang. The BBC's Stephen McDonnell reports.
According to Chinese state television, there was an argument. Then somebody, now viewed as a suspect, blocked the door of the building using a motorbike and lit the fire. Flames were seen pouring from a 3-storey building as a crowd looked on. Karaoke bars in China typically have a series of rooms where small groups of friends can gather and sing late into the night. Police say their initial inquiries are pointing towards this being a deliberate act, but that the investigation is continuing.
Stephen McDonnell reporting. The government is paying more than $500,000 in compensation to a man who was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned. Tyson Redman was convicted of wounding and injuring in August 2007 and spent 2.5 years in prison. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
In December 2013, the Court of Appeal quashed Mr Redman's convictions and 7 months later he applied for compensation. The former Justice Minister Amy Adams got independent advice that Mr Redman was most likely innocent. A second report on how much compensation should be paid was completed after last year's election. The Justice Minister Andrew Little has now announced Mr Redman was offered and has accepted just over $551,000. Mr Little says the Crown accepts Mr Redman's innocence and apologises unreservedly for his wrongful convictions and imprisonment. Atu i te whare pārimata, ko Chris Bramwell ahau.
The Returned in Services Association is expecting good turnouts at Anzac Day services throughout the country tomorrow. It's the 103rd anniversary of the Gallipoli landings, and this year also marks the centenary of several battles on the Western Front and the armistice that ended the First World War in November 1918. The RSA's president, BJ Clark, says interest in commemorating those who made the ultimate sacrifice is growing, particularly among young people. He says many attend services wearing the medals of a relation who served, thus continuing to honour their service long after they've gone. Meanwhile, the government has announced more than $1 million in grant payments over the next 4 years to support services for veterans. The RSA will get $250,000 each year and the No Duff Charitable Trust $25,000. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand now has 41,000 war veterans, about 30,000 of whom were involved in contemporary conflicts like Vietnam, East Timor and Afghanistan.
And we are seeing cases of post-traumatic stress, and many of our younger men and women are returning from operational service and do require our help and our assistance.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and the trust that runs a South Taranaki cinema, which has banned the wearing of pyjamas, onesies and dressing gowns, is backing the move. Hawara Cinema too has made headlines around the world by posing a friendly reminder of its dress code on its Facebook page over the weekend. The Trust chairman, Stu Wilkinson, says it fully supports the decision of manager Kirsty Burke.
Kirsty and the team have drawn a line to maintain a standard of dress. So the position of the Trust board is to support our management team 100%.
Stu Wilkinson likens the move to refusing entry to drunks. He says feedback on the decision has been overwhelmingly positive. It's 5 past 5. Blues Chief Executive Michael Redmond disagrees they're still letting go of players they should be retaining. During the side's struggles of the past few years, a focal point of discussion has been players moving to other Super Rugby franchises and doing well. While acknowledging the loss of players from the richest talent pool in the country was once an issue, Redmond denies it still is.
I don't see a theme there, and I think it's somewhat of an old argument, and that there was a period there when the Blues let a number of players go that went on to achieve great things, and that's well documented. All we can do is focus on the group that we have and try to get the best out of them while they're here.
Blues Chief Executive Michael Redmond. Wellington Phoenix Chairman Rob Morrison is denying reports the football club's A-League licence is up for sale. The Phoenix were granted a 4-year licence extension in 2016, but on- and off-field struggles have stirred speculation about the club's future. Morrison says no decision on that will be made until the future of the whole league is clearer. Meanwhile, Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp has asked fans to show respect outside Anfield before tomorrow morning's Champions League semi-final against Roma. Cans, bottles and flares were thrown at Manchester City's bus as it arrived at the ground before the first leg of their quarter-final earlier this month. European football's governing body, UEFA, has opened disciplinary proceedings. And that's the news.
This year marks 100 years since the end of the First World War and the culmination of a big effort by historians to tell the story of it and its legacy. Tomorrow on Anzac Day morning we'll hear from some of them and some of those who lived through war this past century. And we'll also hear some of the music they made and the music they played. Join us after 7 tomorrow on Anzac Day morning on RNZ National.
And now the Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo and Taumaranui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Cloudy periods with isolated showers clearing tomorrow. Taranaki to Vanuatu, including Taihape, mostly cloudy with isolated showers. Horowhenua to Wellington and Gisborne to Wairarapa. Fine apart from some cloudy periods about Horowhenua and Kapiti today. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury fine apart from isolated showers south of Christchurch this afternoon. Otago and Southland, long fine spells today, but the odd shower about the coast until evening, becoming cloudy tomorrow with a few spots of afternoon or evening rain. Bulla and Westland often cloudy, isolated showers clearing tomorrow morning. For Fiordland, occasional showers clearing tonight, showers returning tomorrow morning though, and then turning to rain in the evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with the odd shower. RNZ National, it's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Alex Perrottet.
Thank you very much, Anna. Great to be with you. I'm in, of course, for John Campbell. Coming up, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge welcome a new prince. There's a stoush over the rezoning of 2 Christchurch secondary schools. And we'll talk about that Taranaki cinema turning away patrons and we're wearing onesies and pyjamas. And a wahine mystery solved 50 years on. But we do begin tonight with terror in Toronto and scenes of chaos and tragedy after a driver mounted the footpath in a rented van, ploughing into pedestrians during the busy lunchtime period, killing at least 10 and injuring 16 others. The 25-year-old driver, Alec Minassian, who's now in custody, continued his rampage for 2.5 kilometres before being apprehended by the police. You might have seen footage there of that person being apprehended and the cool and calm approach of that police officer that managed to arrest him. Zach Fleming has this report.
Horrific scenes in Toronto after a driver ploughed his white Ryder rental van onto a footpath, killing at least 10 pedestrians and injuring 16 others.
We've located that vehicle. The driver's in custody right now, and he's been investigated to the events that took place this afternoon. I also want to offer my condolences to the families and the victims.
Blood splattered the footpath and shoes and items of clothing lay strewn on the street behind emergency tape as police cordoned off the area. Witnesses described the driver as deliberately targeting victims, knocking them down like bowling pins.
He just went on the sidewalk. He just started hitting everybody, man. He hit every single person on the sidewalk. Anybody in his way he would hit. The bus stop, everything got shattered. There was a lady in there that I saw. I just stopped and I looked and I went after it again. All I see is just crumbling up one by one, one by one.
The incident took place over 16 blocks, ending as the driver struck a bus stop. Witnesses say he pointed a black object at police officers, taunting them into shooting him.
I seen a stroller. I didn't see the baby. I saw a stroller split in half. I seen people. The most gruesome scene I seen was a young empress, a woman's leg. Her leg was on once. Oh man. It was really bad.
It's okay.
Really bad.
It was just while he was in the middle of the intersection, and the van just went right into him, plowed right into him. And then apparently he drove down further, and he went onto the sidewalk by the next building, and he hit more people there and just kept going.
And so many people just shouting, "Stop the car!" But he didn't. He just kept moving, and he hit some people, and 3 people lie down there, and they didn't move at all.
Canada's Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodall, said it's not yet known if terrorism was the driver's motive.
That incident is under investigation at this moment by the Toronto Police Service, with the full and complete cooperation of the Ontario Provincial Police and the RCMP, as is appropriate, together with others. Police are doing their very best as rapidly as possible to identify precisely what has taken place here and why, but it is obviously a very serious incident.
Toronto Mayor John Tory said his heart went out to the victims, many thought to be office workers on their lunch breaks.
We obviously don't have a lot of detail we can provide as yet, but we know there were casualties, and our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to the families and friends of those people.
A group of 7 foreign ministers from countries including the US, Canada and Britain were meeting in the downtown area of Toronto at the time of the attack. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have welcomed their 3rd child, a son, with Prince William joking that the family of 5 has thrice the worry now. The Duchess of Cambridge and her husband introduced the newest prince to the world on the steps of the Lindo wing of St Mary's Hospital just 7 hours after giving birth, with most of the world's mothers wondering how she's doing it. Now, you might have noticed he was born on the feast of St George, but of course he has a brother with that name, so Arthur, Albert and Philip are now the bookies' favourites for the new baby, who will be the 5th in line to the throne. Our producer Bridget Burke reports.
The unofficial town crier Tony Appleton on the steps of the private Lindo wing of St Mary's Hospital announcing the birth of the newest prince. Thousands gathered on the streets in anticipation as the Duke of Cambridge pulled up in his Land Rover, bringing 4-year-old George and 2-year-old Charlotte to meet their new baby brother. Prince George, still in his school uniform, and Princess Charlotte, wearing a light blue dress and navy blue cardigan, held their father's hand as they walked up the hospital stairs. Princess Charlotte smiled and waved as she walked on tippy-toes, turning around at the top of the steps for a final wave to an adoring crowd before going inside.
I loved it. It was amazing. Us Americans, we love the monarch. We love William and Kate, and congratulations. It was wonderful. I love it. As American, we love them. Absolutely love them.
Yeah, it was great. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful to see him come out and wave. Now I know why all the Londoners love it, all the people in England. It's thrilling. It is.
Just 7 hours after giving birth, there were cheers as the couple and their baby emerged from the hospital, with the Duchess wearing a red dress and nude heels, holding her newborn son nestled in a white blanket. The couple smiled and waved to the crowd, posing for photographs. The yet unnamed baby boy was born weighing 8 pounds 7 ounces, the largest of the Duke and Duchess's newborns. Sophie Phillips and her friend Charlotte Bannister were among the well-wishers gathered outside.
I just think she's amazing considering she only gave birth
6 hours
ago.
ago.
6 hours ago. She's a really great woman.
Yeah, really inspiring.
Yeah.
The new prince is the Queen's 6th great-grandchild and is behind his grandfather and heir Prince Charles, Father William and siblings George and Charlotte in line to the throne. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced this morning she would be sending a collection of New Zealand books and a handmade woolen blanket as a gift. She said she would also be adding a personal gift, a white linen romper with a buzzy bee lining made by a family member. Kensington Palace said the Queen, Prince Charles and other members of the extended royal family were delighted by the news. Tributes were also flowing in from around the world. At the White House, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, herself a mother of 2 boys and a girl, offered her congratulations.
I want to congratulate the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge on the birth of their 3rd child, a baby boy. And from one mother to another, I know the reality of being outnumbered can be very scary, but I know she and Prince William will continue to be amazing parents.
The royal couple left the hospital with the newest prince strapped safely in the car in his baby capsule. It is expected his name will be announced in the next day or two, with Arthur, Albert, Frederick, James, Jack and Philip hot favourites at the bookies. The Duchess is expected to take an extended period of time off to recover from the birth before attending the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle on May 19. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
Now, briefly, we go back to our lead story of last night, broken here by Zach Fleming, our reporter, on the controversial security firm Thompson and Clark. The Prime Minister now says the firm's surveillance of 1080 protesters may also be investigated by the State Services Commission. Checkpoint revealed yesterday the firm is carrying out surveillance on activists for the Department of Conservation, monitoring social media accounts and analysing whether they're capable of carrying out attacks on DOC staff. In March, a State Services Commission investigation was launched after it was revealed Thompson and Clark had spied on Canterbury earthquake claimants for Southern Response, and that was subsequently widened to include the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment's use of the firm. Jacinda Ardern was asked about the matter at her post-cabinet press conference this afternoon.
Prime Minister, you made it really clear last month that you didn't want government departments to be using the security firm Thompson and Clark to be spying on New Zealanders. The Department of Conservation, they're using Thompson and Clark to carry out surveillance on anti-1080 protesters. Are you comfortable with that?
I've sought clarification over what it is exactly that Thompson and Clark have been doing for DOC for that very reason. My understanding is that DOC did ask them to monitor threats on social media. But I'd say that's very different from monitoring individuals, and the department, as I understand, have said that they've not asked them to carry out surveillance on individuals because that would be of concern.
Yeah, the department has said, though, that if people are making threats, then Thompson and Clark then basically figures out whether they are capable of carrying out those threats. So doesn't that take...
And that crosses over, I think, into the space that we've really asked the State Services Commission to undertake some work, and for good reason. Questions have been asked over whether or not some of that surveillance at an individual level is going too far. So I would hope that the SSC, if it's relevant to the work that they're doing, would include that. But as I say, monitoring of social media is something that obviously the Department of Conservation has concerns about, because there have been specific threats online to their staff, and they should be concerned about that.
That's the Prime Minister there talking about the threats and coverage, really, and the surveillance that could be going on and is going on by government departments there, particularly in regard to threats against DOC staff. We'll stay on that story, broken here on Checkpoint by Zach Fleming. But for now, we go to the Pacific. You might be wondering, what is the latest with that great big volcano, it's called, in Umbai. This is in Vanuatu. The government now says it's planning to permanently move the entire 11,000 strong population of the island of Umbai as it's erupting again. Umbai's Mount Lombenben erupted last September, prompting a mass evacuation of residents. Many returned after a month, but in the last month the Manaro crater has blanketed the island in ash, acid rain and sulphuric fumes, killing crops and causing health problems. Now, last week, a local Anglican priest told us he feared residents would die without government help. I asked Vanuatu's Internal Affairs Minister, Andrew Napuat, how bad the situation on Umbai is right now.
The situation at the moment is severe in terms of the livelihood of the people, especially with the food and everything on one part of the island, although the other part of Umbai, like the eastern part of the island, is a bit okay for people to move there, and there's food, there's some food on that part of the island. But for the other parts, like the western part, the northern part, and southern part of the island, some of those areas are really affected. there's no more food. Root crops have all died, and streams of river have all dried up, and so that's the situation. And they don't have water at the moment, which is why there are some relief supplies that were done by the government and its partners, and the people have been served with some relief supplies in terms of water.
Right, and you're from
they're wearing.
Apologies for the interruption, but I've noticed as well you're from Tana Island. This is the one that the ever erupting island in the south. So from your experience, and have you seen Umbai in the last week or so? I mean, how bad does it compare to eruptions such as the one that happened on Umbai just last September?
I think it's worse. It's worse than Tana. I have never seen anything like that on Tana before. Although we also have volcanic ash on Tana, the one on Umbai is much more serious than the one in Tana. And I have never seen such a very heavy volcanic ash on Tana before.
Okay, so in September, the decision was taken to move all these people off the island. There's about 11,000 people there. You're saying there's no water. We've seen photos that we can see. Some of our viewers can see them as well of the ash covering the island, food as well as schools and homes and roofs, and some of those roofs even caving in. What's your specific plan? Are you going to evacuate again?
Yes, at the moment, when the government declared the state of emergency over Umbai, it gave 3 months to the relevant authorities like the National Disaster Management Office, police, and everyone to collaborate and develop an operational plan. That's for the short term, mid-term, and long term to address the situation on the island. And yes, the government has already made a decision to identify sites in some of the islands that are near Umbai, like Maiwo, Pentecost, Santo, and Malakula. And so that's going to happen.
And my question is, Mr. Napawat, though, how soon can this happen? We've heard from Father William Bias, he's a priest on the island, saying people will starve if they don't move. So you have been praised in the past, such as in September, moving all those people off the island. There's criticism now, though, that it's not happening quick enough. How soon can you get them off?
We only have 3 months. We only have 3 months to do what we need to do to move them out of the island. And so we're really working on that. We've already started talking to the people in the islands of Pentecost and Maiwo, Santo, and Malakula. And so once we get that clearance and once the clusters can come up with their plans, which is going to be soon, I would say in the next 2 weeks or so, when we have the final plan in place, and then we can start the evacuation.
Okay, so you're saying an evacuation, well, not in the next week, but soon after that. Finally, Mr. Napawat, we had the eruption in September now again. Are some of these chiefs from the nearby islands offering land on a permanent basis? Are we going to see perhaps people evacuated permanently from Umbai?
I think so, yes. They're going to be evacuated permanently. That's the safest thing to do. And we would encourage them to consider that. Although some of them might think that they would want to go back to Umbai, the safest thing to do, in the government's opinion, is for them to relocate permanently and decide on some of those islands. And as you know, the culture here contributes a lot in the way we build relationships and all that. And we are happy in the way that some of the chiefs of those islands are willingly offering their land for these people to relocate. And I know that when they move to some of these islands, they will feed in and settle in really well with the people. And so that's something that's a contributing factor in this evacuation. It's not like we're displacing people and they're losing so many things. I believe that when they move to some of these other islands, they'll be welcomed, and the hospitality will be the same as they were in before.
And how many, just finally, how many of those 11,000 people are you planning or estimating to move permanently to some of these islands?
See, the last time we did the first evacuation, the whole island was evacuated. And so it's in the interest of the government to do the same, for them to move out, for everyone to move out of the island. It's much safer that way.
And so just to clarify, you are proposing everyone permanently to move off Ambai?
I am personally proposing, and I'm encouraging them to move out permanently on Ambai.
Andrew Napuat, he is the Internal Affairs Minister of Vanuatu. A huge job, one would think, permanently moving 11,000 people off that volcanic island. The cloud with the silver lining, of course, is that good news that chiefs and people in nearby villages and islands opening their homes to those people affected by that erupting volcano. Back home now, a stoush is brewing in eastern Christchurch over a proposed zone change for two of the city's major high schools. The Ministry of Education is rebuilding Shirley Boys School and Avonside Girls School on the old QE2 stadium site, much further north than their current locations. Now, the new schools will keep the names Shirley Boys and Avonside Girls, but the government wants to change their zones, leaving some families in some areas around Shirley and Avonside feeling betrayed and potentially out of pocket. Logan Church reports.
Christchurch teacher and mother of two, Vanessa Banhoef, lives in Dellington, well inside both Shirley Boys and Avonside Girls zone. At 4 and 5 years old, her children are well off high school years. However, given both schools' reputation, her family bought in the area so her kids could attend either school. However, her Dellington house is well out of the proposed new zoning, and now she is fighting to have it brought back in.
It's a lot of stress. I've been up making posters and signs and doing pamphlet drops. I should have been doing my own prep work for my own classes. I've had a lot of sleepless nights, to be honest, because we don't want our kids to lose access to the secondary schools that we bought in the area for, and we don't want to have to shift house just to get into those schools again.
Vanessa is now making signs and printing pamphlets in a bid to get as many people to submit on the proposed changes. The issue started several years ago when the government announced that both schools needed to relocate as their land wasn't suitable to rebuild on. However, parents living in the area didn't anticipate the zone also moving. Some streets, including Vanessa's, would be out of any local single-sex high school zone. She says she will lose up to $90,000 if they have to sell their house and move.
Well, ultimately, we could move, but we would take a massive loss on our house. Like, what I paid for this house, I wouldn't be able to get anything like that in zone. Because, I mean, in my case, I wouldn't have bought this house if it wasn't zoned for a good secondary school. So I can't expect another parent to buy a 4-bedroom house. If it's not zoned for a secondary school, why would they want to?
Don Gold is in a similar situation. His son is 10 years old and currently attends Shirley Primary. The plan was for him to attend Shirley Boys High School, but the proposed rezoning will take that opportunity away.
What they've done is effectively create a new high school over in QE2 and closed ours. My child was in zone. My child is currently at the local primary school. He was in zone for the local high schools, and now he's no longer going to be in zone for that school.
Don is also worried about the impact on the community, which he expects to change dramatically if the rezoning goes ahead.
More and more of these schools are closing in their zoning opportunities, so it's great if you've got a family where you've got an older sibling that's already at the school, so you can get into that opportunity. But when you're an only child, you go where you can go. So we're now at the bottom of the rung, basically, less opportunities.
Margaret Stewart has a son at Shirley Boys and another at Shirley Intermediate. She says the proposed rezoning is a slap in the face for an area that has suffered extensively from the earthquakes.
We're all saying, the ones in the current zone, we're saying keep us in, don't throw us out. We've been through enough with the earthquakes, and some of us haven't got our houses fixed yet. We've had other schools closed and our roads are crap, and we don't need something else.
Everyone I spoke to today said their options are limited if the proposal goes ahead, with co-ed Maidaho High School being one of the only other nearby schools available. The Minister of Education, Chris Hipkins, refused to be interviewed for this story, instead saying in a statement He's listening to the concerns of any families who could be affected by any changes to zones, but they also need to respect the consultation process and can't preempt that. Consultation on the proposed rezoning closes on Thursday. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Ko Logan Church Tēnei.
A Taranaki cinema is standing by its decision to turn away customers wearing pyjamas, onesies and even dressing gowns to the movies, saying that it lowers the tone. Hawera Cinema 2 has made headlines around the world after a friendly reminder of its dress code on its Facebook page took on a life of its own. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin, very well dressed mind you, has been in Hawera.
Independently operated, Hawera Cinema 2 is situated on a prominent corner in the South Taranaki town CBD. It boasts 2 modern theatres and offers plush premium seating for those willing to pay that little bit extra. The cinema's manager, Kirsty Burke, says it has a long-standing ban on dirty work boots, but recently had noticed sartorial standards were dropping.
Over the last couple of months we've noticed an increase in people coming to the theatre and with dirty footwear, because that was part of the post as well as people wearing pyjamas and dressing gowns. And we believe we have a lovely theatre that has a nice atmosphere, and we don't think that that kind of attire is appropriate, and we believe it lowers the tone of the whole complex.
Miss Burke says she's been taken aback by the international attention the dress code has garnered, which has included fielding calls from the BBC and The Guardian.
Well, for starters, the reaction full stop has been absolutely overwhelming. No way did we ever think that a friendly little reminder to our customers would go global, but the majority of the response has been in our favour. I mean, all day yesterday we had customers congratulating us, saying well done you for making a stand.
Ms Burke, who has managed the Hawera Cinema for 17 years, says she simply wanted to stamp out the problem before it got out of hand. So what were the issues around onesies and pyjamas? Is that actually an issue here?
We just wanted to nip it in the bud before it became a major issue. We do not, I'm aware of other businesses where they have what is commonly called the PJ Brigade that shop there, and we did not want to fall into that category.
Moviegoers at the complex by and large supported the dress code. Eileen Tippett, who had just watched Peter Rabbit with her husband and grandchildren, was in favour of the ban.
I agree. I mean, I think that you need to take a bit of pride in yourself and in your community and dress appropriately.
Well, you reckon it sets a bad example, that kind of people?
Yeah, I do actually. I do. I think that, as I say, you need to take a bit of pride in yourself.
Ashley McDonald and Michael Salisbury were off to see Ready Player One. Ashley supported the move.
I think it's probably a good idea because it's a public place and, you should probably dress up. Just a little bit.
She reckoned there was probably grounds for a ban on bedroom attire. Is that something people do in Hawera, go out and about in their pyjamas?
Personally, I've seen good old pack and save in the morning. You'd see some people in their pyjamas, yeah. They might just be having a busy day, I guess. Busy morning. No time to get changed. Let's just go get some breakfast, bacon and eggs.
But cinema goer Ali Ranui thinks the ban is a bit over the top, especially for evening screenings.
The feature movie will commence screening shortly.
Have you seen people come to the cinema in their pyjamas or onesies?
Yeah, I've seen them sneaking in. Well, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, if you're coming daytime, normal time, yeah, but I reckon if you're having insomnia movies that go for hours and hours, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, they're just pyjamas. I've seen people walk in supermarkets in their pyjamas at night time. When people dash in and dash out. What's the problem?
Alright, that's no worries. How you doing, mate? The manager of the nearby White Hart Hotel, Lovedeep Singh, says he prefers his patrons not to don pyjamas in the bar, but he's been known to turn a blind eye.
It's a pub, there are a lot of people here socializing and all, and we want people to be in appropriate dress code here, not like pajamas and all that kind of stuff. I haven't seen anyone coming in wannabes and all those kind of things here, but mostly pajamas, which is sort of okay, but not exactly.
The chair of the Hawera Cinema 2 Trust, Stu Wilkinson, supports Miss Burke's decision and reckons the ban is no different to refusing entry to drunks or turning away youngsters from a restricted movie. So if you're going to the flicks and kept up, I hawara mo te hōtaka o te ahihahi, ko Robin Martin ahau.
Coming up on Checkpoint, the President of New Zealand Cricket is threatened with physical violence in a petition to have her dumped from the Sky Cricket TV commentary team. A new study finds menstrual cups are more likely than tampons to cause a potentially deadly toxic shock syndrome. And a wahine mystery solved 50 years on. Of course, we love your feedback. Keep texting in. 2101, of course, is the text number. You can tweet us, you can email us and all that. The usual ways of getting in touch. We always love to hear feedback. We might even read out some of it tonight. But first, of course, here's Anna Thomas with the headlines.
Police in Toronto are still searching for a motive behind the killing of 10 people and the chaos and mayhem when a van ploughed into shoppers on a footpath in the busy central city earlier today. A 25-year-old Toronto man, Alec Manassian, is in custody. The city's police chief says indications are that the attack was deliberate, but that it does not pose a wider security threat. 9 people have been arrested in a police bid to break up a synthetic cannabis operation. Police found large amounts of the drug and seized $500,000 worth of assets and cash when they searched properties in West Auckland, Tauranga and Papamoa. Detective Senior Sergeant Nick Pritchard says those arrested are alleged to have been involved in the manufacture, supply and distribution of synthetic cannabis throughout the whole North Island. The Justice Minister says Tyson Redman, wrongfully convicted of wounding and injuring in August 2007, has accepted a payout of just over $551,000. Mr Redmond spent 2.5 years in prison, but the Court of Appeal quashed his convictions in December 2013 and he applied for compensation. The former Justice Minister, Amy Adams, got independent advice that Mr Redmond was most likely innocent, and a second report on how much he should be paid was completed after the last election. Andrew Little says the Crown accepts Mr Redmond's innocence and apologises unreservedly for his wrongful convictions and imprisonment. The government is to pay out more than $1 million in grants over the next 4 years to returned servicemen and women. The Prime Minister says New Zealand now has 41,000 war veterans, about 30,000 of whom were involved in contemporary conflicts like Vietnam, East Timor and Afghanistan. Jacinda Ardern says many young men and women returnees do need help for such conditions as post-traumatic stress disorder. And the Prime Minister is denying accusations the government failed to consult adequately with the oil and gas industry before putting a halt to most future exploration permits. Earlier this month, the government said there would be no new permits for offshore oil exploration, limiting this year's block offer to onshore Taranaki. The ACT leader David Seymour says the industry was kept in the dark, but Jacinda Ardern says it's all been done by the book. And those are the headlines.
Thanks very much, Anna. You doing much for Anzac Day tomorrow?
Yes, heading out to Papakura and we'll be commemorating it with a lot of returned service people out there.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned men and women. I didn't see the women in the script, but I had a grandfather and a grandmother involved, and I always mention the women. And I'll be at Auckland. I, as you know, usually work on morning report, so get up pretty early in the morning, so I won't break that. I hear the Prime Minister will be there as well, so good to see what she has to say. So thanks very much. We'll see you again on the hour. Business now. We've got Emile Donovan in the Wellington studio with a business chat. Emile, the Aussie owners of a couple of internet companies here have decided to stay, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So this is the telco, the Australian telco Vocus. So Vocus owns the Orcon and Slingshot internet operators here. Together they have about 15% of the broadband market. Now, last year, Vocus put both of those businesses up for sale. They needed to raise some cash to pay down some debt, and they didn't really consider either of the companies to be a core part of their operations. And look, there were a couple of interested parties here. The usual suspects really. Vodafone was interested, Spark was interested, 2 Degrees were interested, but none of them were prepared to pay the Vocus price, and so Orcon and Slingshot remain in unchanged hands. But Vocus has now basically turned heel. It says it's going to invest in those companies as it needs to increase its earnings. It saw its profits slump by a quarter in the 6 months to December, and while its Kiwi operations are bringing in just over $180 million a year, it wants more cash in the pocket, so it looks as though they're here to stay for the time being anyway. Oh, well, good to see some other Aussies keen to stay here in New Zealand. But you've also got some breaking news for shareholders in Steel and Tube Holdings, I hear. That's right, yeah. So we spoke to the company just about an hour ago. Now, they are warning their shareholders, their smaller shareholders, that a company called Zero Commission is about to make some unsolicited offers to buy shares for a low-ball price, $1.88 per share. That is actually well below the value of the shares when the stock market closed today, which is $2.06 per share. So Steel and Tube Holdings wants its shareholders to know, they reckon there will be about 2,000 shareholders who might be affected and who might get an offer in the next couple of days. They want those shareholders to know it is not endorsing the offer, and it wants people to get financial or legal advice before acting on it at all. And how are those markets going, Emil? So the NZX Top 50 was down 15 points. That's about 0.18%. It ended on 8288. The Kiwi dollar was down about 0.5% against the major currencies. It's buying 71.1 US cents, 93.5 Australian, and 51 of your finest British pence. Hey, thanks so much, Emil. Emil Donovan there with the business update from our Wellington studio. A new study has found menstrual cups are more likely than tampons to cause the potentially deadly toxic shock syndrome. The study, published in the Journal of Applied and Environmental Microbiology, tested tampons and menstrual cups to see how much Staphylococcus bacteria would grow, which can cause toxic shock syndrome. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person has been looking at the study.
Toxic shock syndrome, or TSS, is caused when bacteria enters the bloodstream, and while it can affect anyone, it's more common in women when they're menstruating, as bacteria can grow on tampons or menstrual cups. The cups, which are made of silicone or plastic, are a popular alternative to tampons as they create less waste and only require a one-off cost. But University of Auckland microbiologist Susie Wiles says they're not without their risks.
I've always thought the idea of a menstrual cup was a little bit gross because I know that bacteria like to stick to plastic, but to actually see the data and to see the pictures of these bacteria sticking to the menstrual cup and the fact that they were found to produce the toxin that can then lead to this toxic shock syndrome was really quite frightening.
Dr. Wiles says while the study was carried out in a lab as opposed to using samples from women, one case showed more than 5 times more bacteria on a cup than on a tampon.
I mean, they're trying to replicate it as much as possible, but it does suggest that there would be more. Whether it's 1,000 times more is difficult to say what would actually be in the real world.
Anna, a 30-year-old Wellington woman, began using menstrual cups 4 years ago as she felt they were more convenient, particularly when travelling, than having to find a shop that sold tampons. She can see why bad cleaning habits would lead to a higher risk of toxic shock syndrome, but she's not prepared to give hers up.
I can see the value in doing more sterilisation that would reduce that risk, but there seems to maybe there's a risk with tampons and everything as well. I think you just have to be careful and clean and know your body and know when something might be wrong.
In New Zealand, there were 31 hospitalisations for toxic shock between 2010 and 2015, with women accounting for about 60% of the patients. The founder of My Cup, a Christchurch-based menstrual cup company, Kimberly Shootman, says the risk of contracting the condition is very low.
Just to give you an idea, menstrual cups have been around since the 1930s in various forms. They're very highly engineered now, so they're incredible devices. But there's only been 2 known cases in the world, and both those cases were caused by women who had left their cups in for days rather than hours.
The study found bacteria can stay on grow on cups even when they're washed, but Ms. Shootman says thorough cleaning will deal with that.
Most women just rinse their cup before they put it back in, and that is fine until the end of their cycle, where then you sterilise your cup. And women have been doing this for years and years and years and not had any toxic shock syndrome.
She says her company works hard to raise awareness around safe cup use, but some women may take some time to get their head around it as it's a relatively new product in New Zealand. Mō te hōtaka o te atanei, ko Nita Blake-Person, aho.
The Salvation Army says it's getting more than 300 new families each week asking for help. That's demand not seen since the global recession a decade ago. The Army's annual Red Shield appeal starts next week, and it says of the 120,000 families it helped last year, 60% of people asking for help with basics like food or power were new. That is, not on its books. They hadn't been in for help before. And that comes alongside a 12% jump in beneficiaries asking for a special needs grant in the first 3 months of this year. Our reporter Zach Fleming has more.
More than 17,000 families went to the Salvation Army for help for the first time last year, according to its Head of Welfare Services, Pam Waugh.
We haven't seen anything like this since pre-recession times.
And on top of that, more than 140,000 food grants were given out through Work and Income in just the first 3 months of this year. That's a 22,000 jump on the same period last year.
People are just sitting on the fringe the whole time. One thing going wrong in your budget per week and they can't cope, so they're needing welfare support.
And then there's people like Gina. Not her real name, she's trying to escape an abusive ex. She also went to the Sallies for help for the first time last year, but not for basics.
Living in my vehicle with my 3 children and my dog, trying to get out of an unhealthy environment.
On a benefit, living in a car with a teenager, an intermediate-aged child and a toddler.
We were in our car for about a month. It had become very emotionally draining, and I just knew that we just couldn't do it, live like that. Even the women's refuges were overflowing, so even going there was, not an option.
So she went to the government for help and was placed in emergency housing, but she says she was bounced around.
Kind of moved from town to town to town.
But then she says Work and Income referred her to the Sallies, who helped with budgeting, food parcels, stationery for her kids to get back into school, and now she's looking for a job to get off the benefit.
Now we have been able to actually get into a 3-bedroom rental property, and all my children are at school, they're all stable, they're in a safe environment. So that's really exciting for me, going into an employment, being able to support my children, and just showing them that how we were living before, you can always change that.
An example of how the right support services can change lives. But for those people sitting on the fringe, Pam Waugh says she doesn't see the need for basic grants going away anytime soon.
We've watched over the last few years of things getting worse for our families. Like I said, housing is the biggest problem. We have families that are paying up to 70-80% of their money each week on housing. And so people say, well, get a cheaper house, but that's easier said than done, because the cheapest houses are still too expensive for a lot of our people. So when you've got that happening, your dispensable money like food money or clothing money is what you'll go without.
Which is what the Sallies say more and more people are going to them for help with. Their Red Shield appeal starts next week. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Zach, the President of New Zealand Cricket, Debbie Hockley, has been threatened with physical violence in a petition to have her dumped from the Sky Cricket TV commentary team. Now, the petition, signed by more than 400 people, comes after Hockley made what many thought was a race-based comment whilst commentating on a Black Caps test match last year, a comment she has since apologised for. RNZ Fair Play Sports podcast presenter Zoe George reports.
Debbie Hockley played more than 100 games for New Zealand and joined the Sky commentary team last season. She came under fire last year after making a race-based comment during the second test between the Black Caps and the West Indies in Hamilton in December. Hockley, who was co-hosting with former Black Cap Simon Doull at the time, singled out a woman at the ground, speculating the spectator might be tennis star Serena Williams. Avid cricket fan Chris Higgins has launched the petition, calling for Hockley to be dropped. He says her commentary in general is ill-informed and she's not up to it.
She just doesn't have the knowledge of, compared to the other commentators like Mark Richardson, she just says some really retarded things. All of the male commentators, they know the basic kind of fundamentals, and they don't say absolutely outrageous things that are just stupid. Debbie Hockley's commentary, particularly in the Test series, was just an absolute joke, to be honest. Some of the comments were the sort of things that my mum would say sitting next to me watching the cricket.
The petition has been signed by 400 people, some of whom have left comments saying they, quote, would smash Hockley and calling her names like stupid bimbo and worse. Chris Higgins says he doesn't support the derogatory comments. Hockley, who admitted at the time she'd made a rookie mistake, was unavailable for comment, but in a statement New Zealand Cricket said the petition and its comments were misinformed, misguided and, in terms of some of the more intolerant comments, misogynist. NZC media manager Richard Bock said if the derogatory terms were made by a player or spectator at a game, players would face code of conduct hearings and the spectator would be ejected and possibly prosecuted. Bock says the comments made on the petition justifies NZC's push for more gender diversity in the game.
What we saw in the petition, I don't think there's any place for that anywhere, for some of that language. And New Zealand Cricket fully supports having female voices in the commentary box during Black Caps games, and it will continue to support Sky in that endeavour. And we think it's really important that we see more gender diversity throughout the game.
University of Auckland sports sociologist Tony Bruce has received similar comments in the past. She says the attitudes shown in the petition and its commenters are endemic in sport.
There is something very deep in sport about it being a space for men, a space where men can be with other men and be manly, however that's determined. So whenever women kind of enter into it in any kind of way that looks like they have some power, it's when you take that authority to actually have a voice is when the pushback seems to be the most great.
Sports psychologist Karen Nimmo says the comments and attitudes are attention-seeking type behaviour, but what she finds worrying is if the commenters believe what they are saying. Nimmo says comments can have a detrimental effect on journalists and women in the media.
It's traumatising, and over time that can really have an impact on people's self-worth and confidence and even their professional sort of interest in their career.
Stuff sports journalist Dana Johansson gave up her opinion column writing after a Facebook hate page was established following a piece she wrote about the Sochi Winter Olympics. She says a tidal wave of hate came at her, which was well organised and deliberate and targeted to intimidate and humiliate.
Female broadcasters and journalists, they're not so much judged on just their insights or opinion. There's like a whole other set of parameters that are involved. They're judged on their appearance or their voice or their hair and their clothes and their makeup and even their past.
Petition organiser Chris Higgins has also lodged a complaint with Sky Sport. Richard Last, Director of Sport at Sky, said in a statement provided to RNZ that Debbie Hockley contributed positively to the commentary team this season and that her pedigree is impressive. Hockley has continued to commentate cricket for Sky Sport. The company says it will undertake a review of the commentary team in the coming months. For Checkpoint, Zoe George Tene.
Yeah, some strong views in that report. Get in touch. We're interested in your views as well. If you have a point of view on that one, you can text in on 2101, email or follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you think. On to a story about different wahine. 50 years ago, as the wahine founded in Wellington Harbour, a young soldier felt a sense of duty and went to help survivors as they swept into Seatoon on lifeboats. A photographer captured the moment 21-year-old Chris Wilson carried a terrified young boy from a lifeboat onto the shore. 2 years ago, Mr. Wilson started looking for the boy in that photo. He was also interviewed here on Checkpoint on the eve of the 50th anniversary. He hoped the boy or someone who knew him might come forward, but it remained a mystery until last weekend. Laura Dooney's been helping Mr. Wilson look for the boy, and she filed this report.
The boy looks scared and wet in the old black and white photograph. Chris Wilson has his arm wrapped around him, covering him with a white towel in an attempt to keep him warm. The boy had been on board the wahine when it capsized, killing 53 people on April 10, 1968. Mr. Wilson wanted to find the boy, meet him, talk to him, and after a 2-year search, the boy has a name. His name was Andre Farmer. His brother Ivan was also on board the wahine that day and now lives in Zimbabwe. He saw Chris Wilson's Checkpoint interview online and recognised his brother.
My son, who is currently working in the UK, sent me that picture to my WhatsApp, and I just responded back to him saying, yeah, that was your uncle. 4 or 5 days after that, I noticed it popped up on YouTube. So I thought, what's it doing there? So I actually went into it, and there was the video. So I played it through, took the details down, and I decided to contact you people.
Ivan helped tell some of the story of how Andre ended up in Mr. Wilson's arms. He was 11, Andre was 7 and their older brother Kim 15 at the time. The children and their mother were going to Wellington to catch a ship to Australia before heading to Zimbabwe to meet their father, who had relocated for work. Ivan has vivid memories of the Wahine sinking, particularly the moment his mother told Kim she couldn't look after them all as they abandoned ship.
With that, my older brother picked me up and threw me overboard. I landed in this lifeboat that was pretty jam-packed with people, and landing on the people actually broke my fall.
After that, he thinks his mum, who couldn't swim, and brothers jumped into the water and were pulled onto a rubber raft that quickly capsized.
And my mother at one point was holding, I think, my oldest brother by his hair to keep him above water, and Andre was being held up between her legs by her knees to keep his head above water. I think from there on in, they were then rescued by a tugboat. Andre somehow, I think, got separated. From there on in, I don't know what happened to him.
Much of that story will never be told. Sadly, Andre passed away from pancreatic cancer 4 years ago. He was 53 years old. We do know the young Andre made it to shore, where the photograph shows him being held by young soldier Chris Wilson, who then carried the little boy to a waiting bus full of survivors, heading for a makeshift hospital. For the past 2 years, Chris has wondered what happened to him.
I think as you get older, you start reviewing your life in retrospect, and just a lot of questions pass through your mind, and you know, it's like old girlfriends, you know, you sort of think, well, I wonder what's ever happened to her, and, you know, has she had a happy life? You know, so, and the same applied to this little boy, you know, whatever happened to him, and did he have a happy life?
Ivan says he and Andre were reunited at that makeshift hospital.
I'm lying there by myself, and somebody wheels in this other bed with another child on it, and lo and behold, it was my young brother. And I looked at him, I said, Andre. He looked at me, and we just grabbed each other's hands and held each other's hands.
The next day, the family continued their journey and boarded a ship to Australia. Ivan says he was carried on kicking, biting and screaming. He says his mother didn't talk about the disaster much after that. Andre's son, Brett Farmer, also saw the story online. He says the same thing about his dad. The 31-year-old lives in Australia with his wife and family. He says, like the other survivors, his father was expected to just get on with his life, despite the trauma he'd endured.
I spoke to my brother a little while ago, and he remembers Dad telling us that whenever we went to the beach, his heart would skip a beat whenever a wave would crash near him. So we didn't go to the beach a lot because he was afraid of the water. Not afraid of swimming, but more of the sound of the ocean.
Brett doesn't think his father knew the photo existed. He says his father lived a full life, immigrating to Australia from Zimbabwe in 1988.
He worked very hard. That's all I remember him doing, was working just to provide for us, which was amazing. He was very stubborn, if that's a good word to use for him, but he was funny. He was always funny, always had a smile. You know, if he was grumpy, you know, he still had a bit of a humour behind his grumpiness.
After we found out who Andre Farmer was, I called Chris Wilson to break the news. I've got some good news and some not so good news.
Okay, yes.
We've found the boy in the photo.
Yes.
But
Wonderful.
He's since passed away.
Oh. Okay, that's I'm sorry to hear that. It's a bittersweet moment, isn't it? Yes, I found the boy, but I'm not going to be able to achieve what I was hoping to, and that was to sit down over a beer and find out what he'd done in the last 50 years.
While Mr. Wilson will never meet Andre, he's already been in touch with 2 of his brothers and Brett. The family are grateful to him. He says finding out who Andre was means the mystery is over.
It's closure whether I like it or not, and I don't like it. I would have liked it to have had the other ending, the alternative ending, where we did meet. So, yeah, it's closure which I would rather have not had.
For Checkpoint, ko Laura Dunia ho.
And we've got a little bit of feedback. We've heard from someone who's been to Birdie's Cafe in Kaitaia in the far north, who says it's got a sign in the window saying they will not serve customers wearing pyjamas or nighties. So the cinema's not the only one with a concern about this. Another feedback about menstrual cups. I'm not giving up using mine. I think the study is misleading. as the lab conditions are different from real life. Dr. Wiles even said she finds the idea of cups gross. She's not a teeny bit biased. There's a question from one of our listeners. Get in touch. We're always interested in what you've got to say. Coming up after 6, a tale of 2 dogs. A dog who's been hailed a hero after keeping a 3-year-old girl warm and safe for 15 hours in dense bush. And an Auckland family pleads for the return of their 6-month-old puppy nearly a week after it was stolen from outside a burger shop. And the latest from Canada after a terror incident in Toronto left 10 dead and 16 injured. We'd love to hear from you. You can text us on 2101, you can Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But as we lead into 6 o'clock, we don't have the birds like we do on Morning Report, so
No.
I'm just going to have to talk very slowly as I cross to Anna Thomas.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The Prime Minister says a controversial security firm's surveillance of 1080 protesters may also be investigated by the State Services Commission. Thompson and Clark is keeping tabs on the protesters for the Department of Conservation, monitoring their social media accounts and determining whether they are capable of carrying out attacks. In March, a State Services Commission inquiry was launched after it was revealed the firm spied on Canterbury earthquake claimants for Southern Response. Jacinda Ardern says the Commission might also need to investigate its work for DOC.
Questions have been asked over whether or not some of that surveillance at an individual level is going too far. So I would hope that the SSC, if it's relevant to the work that they're doing, would include that. But as I say, monitoring of social media is something that obviously the Department of Conservation has concerns about because there have been specific threats online to their staff.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. 9 people have been arrested in a major police bid to break a synthetic cannabis operation. When properties in West Auckland, Tauranga and Papamoa were searched today, officers found large amounts of the drug and seized $500,000 worth of assets, including a motorcycle, a 4-wheel drive, a jet ski and $18,000 in cash. Detective Senior Sergeant Nick Pritchard says those arrested are alleged to have been involved in the manufacture, supply and distribution of synthetic cannabis throughout the whole North Island. He says they'll face a significant number of charges. Mr Pritchard says a rifle and a sawn-off shotgun were also seized. The police in southern China have arrested a man suspected of setting fire to a karaoke lounge, killing 18 people. The fire in the city of Qingyang in the Guangdong province broke out just after midnight in a 3-storey building. State media say a man blocked the entrance to the lounge with a motorbike before setting it ablaze, following an altercation. The police made the arrest a short time after posting a large reward for any information leading to the suspect. A 16-month-old child has been seriously injured after being hit by a car in Otahuhu in Auckland this afternoon. Police were called to the Queen Street address just after 4 o'clock and have been speaking to the driver of the car. The Department of Conservation has been told it has insufficient expertise to assess the risks to passenger ships in the sub-Antarctic. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission has recommended it appoints an expert to oversee navigation safety in the region. Tracy Neal reports.
The hull of the French passenger ship L'Austral was pierced when the ship hit an uncharted rock in the Snares Island last year after drifting into dangerous waters in an unauthorised zone. In a report released this month, the Commission says the voyage planning and standard of management on the bridge did not meet international standards. The ship's operator has been told to improve its crew training and voyage planning. The islands, southwest of Stewart Island, are described by DOC as one of the most pristine areas in New Zealand. This is Tracy Neal.
The coroner has found a serious head injury suffered by a Napier woman during a rugby league game caused her death. Katiana Tareta Pakote Waikato, a 22-year-old meat worker, died last August while playing for Tamatea against the Dannevirke Tigers in Hastings. In his findings, Tim Scott says there is nothing to suggest the injury was caused by illegal or unsporting play. He says it's not entirely clear what happened, but it appears that during the second half, Ms Waikato got possession of the ball and was either tackled or fell backwards, hitting her head hard on the ground. Mr Scott says she was able to stand up and leave the field but later collapsed when walking across the nearby car park and died in hospital that evening of a subdural hemorrhage. A long search for a young wahine survivor caught in a photo has ended in a bittersweet way. Since 2016, Chris Wilson has been searching for the boy he was photographed helping during the 1968 disaster. Members of the boy's family overseas saw an interview with him on Checkpoint before the 50th anniversary earlier this month and got in touch with RNZ. The boy's name was Andre Farmer and he died in 2014, aged 53. Mr Wilson says at least the mystery is over.
It's a bittersweet moment, isn't it? Yes, I found the boy, but I'm not going to be able to achieve what I was hoping to, and that was to sit down over a beer and find out what he'd done in the last 50 years.
Chris Wilson has been put in touch with two of Andre Farmer's brothers and his eldest son. It's 6:05. Swimmer Sophie Pascoe is leaving her hometown Christchurch for 3.5 months to train in Britain ahead of the Tokyo Olympic Games in 2020. Pascoe defended 2 gold medals at the recent Commonwealth Games and now has her sights set on doing the same in 2 years' time after becoming New Zealand's most successful Paralympian by winning triple gold at Rio in 2016. She says she wants to try a new approach.
What can we do that is completely outside of the box that we haven't done before? Came up with an idea that maybe I should head overseas for a little bit and sort of just get maybe a little taste for being outside of my comfort zone, away from, my luxuries, which I call them luxuries because they are my home comfort. That's what I've been surrounded by for the previous 3 campaigns.
Sophie Pascoe leaves next Monday for Nottingham, where British Paralympic swimmer Ollie Hind is based. The battling Blues Super Rugby side have reached out to the Warriors League team for help. While the Blues continue to struggle this year, the Warriors have turned their fortunes around with a superb 6 wins out of 7 games start to the NRL season. Blues Chief Executive Michael Redmond says their approach to the Warriors was well received.
They're happy to share their insights into their journey in the last few years, and I think that's the nature of sport. We're pretty collegial and we share what we can to help everyone get better.
Blues Chief Executive Michael Redmond, and that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, corruption in Brazil, where it seems no business plan is complete without a bribery budget. A Bristol freighter delivers the night mail, which includes a lot of correspondence about Bristol freighters. And the economist Brian Easton assesses the government's decision to end oil and gas exploration off the coast.
And on Lately at 10, we feature campaigners, activists and protesters, or CAPs as we like to call them. We'll have an eye not only on CAPs, but books, music, people and politics, keeping you up to date with the world at the other end of the day. Lately with Karen Hay on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
And now the Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo and Taumaranui, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Cloudy periods with isolated showers, but they will clear tomorrow. Taranaki to Manawatu, including Taihape, mostly cloudy with isolated showers. Horowhenua to Wellington and Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from isolated showers south of Christchurch. Otago and Southland, long fine spells, but the odd shower about the coast until this evening. Becoming cloudy tomorrow with a few spots of afternoon or evening rain. For Bulla and Westland, often cloudy, isolated showers clearing tomorrow morning. For Fiordland, occasional showers clearing tonight. Showers returning tomorrow morning, then turning to rain in the evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with the odd shower. RNZ National, it's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Alex Perrottet.
Thank you very much, Anna. Great to have you here. Anna in for Katrina. I'm in for John. And we're looking at Toronto. There's a big story tonight coming out of Toronto, as we've been reporting throughout the day. Horrific scenes in the heart of what is Canada's largest city. A van driven at high speed careered onto the footpath and mowed down pedestrians at a busy intersection in Toronto during the lunch hour. 10 people were killed, 16 injured. Now, the suspect's in custody but has yet to be charged. The motivation for the attack isn't yet known. Authorities say it was deliberate but is not a security-related incident. The ABC's Greg Jennett is in Toronto and sent this report.
It was lunchtime, 1:30 in the afternoon on a bright spring day. Pedestrians were confronted by a vehicle careering down the footpath at high speed.
he hit every single person on the sidewalk. Anybody in his way, he would hit. The bus stop, everything got shattered. There was a lady in there that I saw. I just stopped and I looked and I went after it again. All I see is just crumbling up one by one, one by one.
It continued on for hundreds of metres.
I seen a stroller. I didn't see the baby. I saw a stroller split in half. I seen people. The most gruesome scene I seen was a young empress, a woman's leg. Her leg was on once. Oh man.
Oh, it's okay.
It was really bad.
It's okay.
Really bad.
Hitting pedestrian after pedestrian.
Pieces of the van went flying everywhere.
And so many people just shouting, "Stop the car!" But he didn't. He just kept moving, and he hit some people, and 3 people lie down there, and they didn't move at all.
The weapon, a white rental van driven by Alex Minassian. A policeman with gun drawn confronted and arrested the 25-year-old after he pulled onto a side street. The man was pointing his mobile phone at the officer like it was a weapon. Police say it was a deliberate act. The motive is unclear. Toronto Police Service Chief Mark Saunders.
We are looking very strongly to what the exact motive or motivation was for this particular incident to take place. And at the end of the day, we will have a fulsome answer and we'll have a fulsome account as to what the conclusion of this is. It's very clear, just from a general perspective, to say that the actions definitely look deliberate.
The driver of the van was not known to police until today. The authorities are open-minded on whether it can be called an act of terrorism.
Well, that's part of the investigation as well. We need to identify whether or not there are more people, if he's working in concert with anyone, or if this is just a lone act on his own doing.
The Mayor, John Tory, spoke about Toronto's proud multi-ethnic traditions.
I hope that we will, as a city, remind ourselves of the fact that we are admired around the world for being inclusive and for being accepting and understanding and considerate, and that we are united in standing in solidarity, especially with those who have fallen victim to this terrible tragedy today.
And there was universal praise for the conduct of the policeman who arrested Alex Minassian. As the 25-year-old man got out of the van, he not only brandished his phone like a gun, but yelled, "Shoot me." Toronto was already on a state of higher alert because the city was hosting a meeting of G7 ministers.
Amazing scenes there from Toronto. That was the ABC's Greg Jennett, who's in Toronto. And of course, stay tuned to RNZ. You'll hear more and more updates of that story as news comes to hand, right throughout the evening, of course. Well, the punters got the sex wrong, and now all bets are on the name. The newest British royal is a boy, despite bookmakers taking far more bets on a girl in the lead up to the birth. The new prince is the 3rd child for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, William and Catherine, or Kate. And he's already back at home at Kensington Palace with his mum and dad and his older brother and sister. BBC royal correspondent Daniela Ralph has this report from London.
Wrapped up for his first public appearance. It will be one of many he'll make over the years. The baby prince in his mother's arms, the newest addition to the royal family. The close-up image, the newborn baby who is now 5th in line to the throne. The Duchess of Cambridge arrived at hospital in the early stages of labour before 6 o'clock this morning. Her son was born at 11:01. At 8 pounds 7 ounces, he is the heaviest of the 3 Cambridge children. And as with Princess Charlotte, the Duchess gave birth and left hospital all on the same day.
Oh yay, oh yay, oh yay, we've got a new prince here today. God save the Queen.
The news it was a boy came a few hours earlier, to the delight of hardened royal watchers, some of whom had been camping outside the hospital for more than a week.
It's wonderful news, isn't it? Fantastic news. Isn't it wonderful?
Isn't it great news? It's bringing everyone to make everyone smile.
There was a visit too from the new big brother and sister. A tentative-looking Prince George, a confident wave from Princess Charlotte, holding tightly onto Dad's hand as they went in for one of those defining moments of family life. And Charlotte showed no sign of nerves in front of the cameras. The first birth announcement came via Twitter, but the official birth notice followed tradition, put on display at Buckingham Palace. The arrival of a baby boy secures Princess Charlotte her place in history.
It's a very significant day for Princess Charlotte because she is the first royal princess in British history not to be moved down the line of succession where the younger brother was born. Before 2013, when the law was changed to give women and men equal succession rights, essentially if a younger prince was born, she would lose her spot.
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and the new baby prince now leave hospital for life as a family of 5 at Kensington Palace. Other than next month's royal wedding, the Duchess will spend the coming months away from the public eye to focus on her family. The Cambridges thanked hospital staff for the care and treatment they'd received. As they left, it was a proud father in charge of the car seat. Just 7 hours after his birth, the baby prince was on his way home. A 3rd child for the Cambridges, a 6th great-grandchild for the Queen.
Daniela Relf in London. And as far as names go, the palace says the baby's name will be announced in due course, of course. But the betting agencies have narrowed it down to either Arthur and Edward. They're the current favourites. If you do have a suggestion, get in touch. We'll be more than happy to pass it on. Perhaps something different for a change. Arthur and Edward have been, slightly overused, I'd say. Back to a story now we had early in the program, the zoning issue in Christchurch. It's a proposed school zoning change. It's been described as part of a drift west in Christchurch. The Ministry of Education is rebuilding Shirley Boys School and Avonside Girls School on the old QE2 stadium site, much further north than their current locations. Now, the new schools will keep their names, Shirley Boys and Avonside Girls, but the government wants to change their zones. That's upset families, of course, in some areas around Shirley and Avonside. The headmaster of Shirley Boys, John Lawrenson, told our producer Bridget Burke the drift west has to stop, and they're prepared to go to Wellington to pitch their case to the minister himself.
We would like to have the Preston's Waitakere area in the zone, and we'd also like a clause that allows our existing people, perhaps for 5 years at least, to have access to come into the school. We're already talking to politicians, the local politicians, and the reason we're talking to them is that the local community are approaching the politicians and saying, hey, listen, do something about it. We're prepared to go to Wellington and make a case to the minister, but I need to stress, and for me this is particularly important, there is no desire by either school to perform a sort of a hegemonic takeover of other schools, dominate the situation in the east. None of that at all. But I tell you what we are intent on doing, for the benefit of the whole of Christchurch, the drift for parents to send the sons and daughters west has to stop. Anybody sitting in the council in Christchurch has to understand that the movement of people from one side of the city to the other side of the city for their education, in our case, Christchurch Boys, Christchurch Girls, Burnside, Cashmere and the rest, that has to stop. It's bad for education, it's bad for families, it's bad for the primary schools, and critically, it's bad for the whole city. Anybody with half a brain would understand that. Our intent is that we have schools that people say, my son or daughter goes to those schools, whether it's Shirley or Avonside or the local co-eds. Our intent is that should happen. And we believe that what we've proposed will allow that to happen. We have to convince one or two, I suspect, around, not the local residents in the east, but one or two people in positions of authority. We have to convince them that that's so.
What do you mean by the drift west?
Anybody, again, looking at what happens will know that out of, for example, let's take Preston's as an example, a significant number of children in that area go west. They go to the schools in the other side of the city. And we're saying that has to stop. It's bad for the city as an entity.
Traditionally, your feeder schools, are they in good health?
Majority of our students, and I'm speaking for Shirley and I believe Avonside as well, come from Chisnellwood. Excellent health, no dramas there at all. Waitakere Primary School, another major feeder through Chisnellwood as a rule. Shirley Primary in good health. A significant number of our children come from South New Brighton, also Marshlands. Again, no dramas with any of those things.
Because it's the parents of the children enrolled there now that this will affect.
Oh, well, I can speak specifically because I've had contacts from Marshlands School in particular. The parents, quite rightly, expect a little wee 5-year-old to go into the school, progress through the ranks, making strong friends, boys and girls as they go through, and they would have every reasonable expectation that if they go through, for example, to Shirley and Avonside, the social connections are not broken, they're strengthened. And again, that helps educational outcomes.
We're going to breaking news now. This has just come in. There's been a security breach at Auckland Airport. It's understood that a passenger, this is at the international terminal, a passenger bypassed security with a knife. So we know that's been confirmed. He didn't have a weapon, it was a knife. The person has been located. We guess he or she has been detained. We haven't had confirmation, but the person has been located. Of course, the airport was forced to delay passenger screenings as a result, and so the airport is now warning people travelling tonight that there could be lengthy delays. So do allow more time there and expect delays if you're heading to Auckland Airport, particularly the international terminal. Someone has tried to bypass, actually got past security with a knife there. You can understand there will be lengthy delays there. Overseas now, police in Nashville have arrested the man suspected of killing 4 people at a Waffle House, ending a methodical day-and-a-half manhunt. Travis Reinking surrendered to police straight away after he was found in a wooded area near a construction site. Tamara Lindstrom from Reuters has more.
After an intense manhunt, Nashville police have arrested the suspect in the Waffle House shooting who allegedly killed 4 people. Authorities releasing these photos of 29-year-old Travis Reinking, who was found armed with a handgun hiding in a wooded area near the restaurant and his apartment.
He did not try to run. As soon as the detective saw him, he pulled out his weapon and told him to get on the ground, and immediately, from what I understand, he got on the ground.
Reinking is accused of opening fire with an AR-15 rifle at the Nashville Waffle House early Sunday. Police records show he had a history of mental illness. 2 years ago, he threatened to kill himself in a drugstore parking lot, claiming the singer Taylor Swift was hacking into his phone. And last year, Reinking was arrested trying to get into the White House.
After the incident at the White House, every federal resource was brought to bear, and that we were able to effectively neutralize what we felt was the threat at the time by ensuring that he did not have the ability to purchase or own weapons, and that those weapons were taken.
Authorities revoked Reinking's gun license and gave his weapons to Reinking's father, who the ATF says could face charges for returning the guns to his son. Authorities said there likely would have been more casualties at the Waffle House had bystander James Shaw Jr. not intervened, wrestling the rifle away.
You have to either react or you're gonna, fold.
Reinking fled the restaurant after the attack, naked except for a green jacket.
Tamara Lindstrom from Reuters with that report. Now, earlier on, we promised you a tale of 2 dogs. Well, actually, it was 2 tales. It was 2 tales of 2 dogs. It's certainly not a dog with 2 tails, at least. Anyway, the first one, an Auckland dog owner says her children are distraught after the puppy they got for Christmas was stolen from outside a burger shop. CCTV footage of Bowie, a 6-month-old brown cavoodle, was released by the police today. It shows a person walking up to the puppy outside Burger Fuel in New Lynn and patting the dog before returning minutes later to unclip her leash and carry her away. Bowie's owner, Jo Hodge, told me she just wants the microchipped pup back.
It's absolutely gut-wrenching. You just think you're popping in for a minute and, it's probably very naive of me, but I just thought she would be safe. It didn't even cross my mind that somebody might take her away.
When you look at the footage, the dog's trying to get back to you in the store and probably yapping away. At what point, though, did you notice that Bowie was gone?
So I was in Burger Fuel and I was watching her. They've got really big windows in the front of Burger Fuel, and I was watching her through there while I was waiting to see if my order was ready, because we'd done a phone ahead order. And I turned around to talk to the guy and turned back, and I couldn't see her head bobbing up and down anymore, so I went straight out. And yeah, she's just gone. I mean, I think on the video it takes about 7 or 8 seconds for her to actually take her away.
What did you immediately think had happened?
I was kind of a bit dumbstruck because I went out and I saw that her lead was still attached to the pole, and I was like, oh, she's broken free of her lead. And then I sort of called to her for a little while, and I was like looking round and thinking, oh, she's escaped. She doesn't normally do this. But then it sort of dawned on me that the lead wasn't broken. It had been unclipped from her collar. She hadn't slipped her collar, and so somebody must have taken her. So I freaked out.
What did you do next? Did you go straight to the police?
I called my partner and told him what I thought had happened. So he came down, and while I was just sort of frozen to the spot, a lady came out of Burger Fuel and said, because I'd gone back into Burger Fuel to check to see if anybody had seen anything, and she came out and said, has your dog been taken? And I said yes, and so she kind of calmed me down and got me to call the police and put a post up on Facebook. Yeah, so she kind of gave me a virtual slap around the face, really, to snap me out of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jo, tell us a little bit about Bowie. How long have you had her, and what's she like?
Oh, she's just the most adorable and friendly and loving little thing. I've never been a dog person before I had Bowie. I was always more of a cat person. But the kids have always wanted a dog, and my partner's always wanted a dog. He's really a dog person, and she's just completely got under my skin. She's just the sweetest little thing. You know, we've had her for probably 4 months or so, since she was about 7 weeks old, and we got her just the week before Christmas. So, yeah, she's been a huge part of our lives for those few months.
Now, Jo, I guess, have you got a tone from the police? I mean, you've made the complaint, the police have put out a notice about it.
Yeah.
What's the tone you get from them in terms of their hopes? Are there any leads?
Not at this stage. I mean, there's a lot of comments on social media. There's a few people saying they think it could be this person or it could be that person. A lot of people have said that they've maybe seen Bowie, but there's a lot of little dogs that look just like her, unfortunately. So, yeah, we're still really, really hopeful. We're hoping that we can find some more footage, maybe through other cameras around the areas. So, yeah, we're just really, really hopeful that all this attention, which is, it's blown my mind, all the attention that it's got. We're just hopeful that it's going to bring her out of the woodwork.
If you were able to track down the person that took the dog, what would you have to say to them?
Just let her come home to her family. We're the only family she's known. My kids are just heartbroken. We're heartbroken. Just give her back.
That's Bowie's owner, Jo Hodge, hopeful but heartbroken, as she said. Now, we can tell you Bowie is microchipped, so if you have any information about Bowie or where she might be, you can call Crime Stoppers. You can do that anonymously. The number is 0800 555 111. 0800 555 111 if you'd like to call Crime Stoppers if you have any information about Bowie. On to a happier tale about a dog. A family dog in Queensland in Australia has been declared an honorary police dog after he kept a missing girl safe in rugged bush. The 3-year-old girl had wandered away from her home southwest of Brisbane, sparking a large search. She was found after spending 15 hours in the bush alongside Max, a partially deaf and blind blue heeler. With more, here's the BBC's John Donnison.
Good boy. Meet Max, 17 years old, blind, half deaf, but a hero. A large search party had been called in after 3-year-old Aurora wandered off into the bush from the family home in rural Queensland. By the end of the day, there was still no sign of the toddler.
Really hard last night. It was really disheartening at 2 o'clock in the morning when everyone left and we were standing here alone in the darkness knowing a 3-year-old was out in the cold.
At first light, the search resumed, but by this time Aurora had been missing in dense bushland for 16 hours. But she wasn't alone.
I yelled out to her and I heard her voice. She recognised me as Granby. I thought it was a bird at first, yelling back, yes. When I got to the top, the dog came to me and led me straight to her.
She told me that she slept under a rock with the dog or something. Yeah. Which I'm just glad that dog didn't just leave her and, yeah.
Max, loyal to the last, had saved the day.
At 3 years old, I would imagine that the young child will be very scared, frightened through the night and cold, and you can only hope that the dog was good company for the child and that they kept each other warm.
Aurora, albeit a little thirsty, is safe and well, and the hero of the day has been made an honorary police dog. Time now for Max to relax.
Good old Max. That's John Donnison from the BBC with that report. And that is Checkpoint for this evening. John's back on Thursday. It's been great to join you, and thanks to you, actually, for joining us on your radio, your television, online, or however you do it these days, or how you might choose to connect with us. You can hear highlights if you do want more. That's in late edition at 10:15 this evening. Do that to catch up on any of our stories. You'll always go to the website, of course, rnz.co.nz/checkpoint. For all the information on what we've been bringing you from New Zealand and around the world. rnz.co.nz is our homepage. From me, Alex Perrottet and the team, good night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A controversial security firm investigated for spying on Canterbury earthquake claimants is again under investigation, this time for its surveillance of 1080 protesters. Auckland Airport says security screening of passengers is resuming after a security breach. Police say 9 people arrested for the alleged manufacture, supply and distribution of synthetic cannabis throughout the North Island face a significant number of charges. And the coroner has found a serious head injury during a rugby game is responsible for the death of a Napier woman. Our next news and weather at 7.
Matinee Idol is back on Anzac Day, and as usual we'll have a musical theme. See if you can guess what it will be.
Tell